Australia is the sixth largest continent on Earth, but it is no less mysterious. The whole continent is divided by a fence, and this fence is the longest in the world. No wonder that there are so many legends and myths around it. It somehow protects the prehistoric reserve, where giant plants grow lushly and giant animals and insects live. This fence itself is closed to mere mortals, and if you decide to climb it, you'll go to jail. What is this secret fence? And why does it exist? Let's find out. Australia is a country of fences. Everything here is fenced off with fences. Every field, every piece of land, entire forests, lakes and riverbanks. You can't get in, you can't get out. But it's all nonsense. Australia has some of the biggest fences in the world. One is 3,253 kilometers, the other 5,120 kilometers. All this story with fences can be safely put in the textbooks as an example of how people first create a global problem, then heroically solve it, actively experimenting and eventually creating a new, even more global problem. Australia is a unique country that is ideally suited for any kind of global experimentation. So what? It is alone on the continent, far from the rest of the world, with a whole set of unique features: natural, biospheric, climatic. So they are experimenting, sometimes with very unfortunate consequences. The theory is that this is a fence, supposedly built to keep out rodents, dingoes, and other animals. The wall is energized in many places and patrolled periodically. But why? And there are no eyewitnesses who have been there to dispel the speculation. The Australians themselves, who live there, say that there is not just one fence in Australia, there are several. If the first is to keep out rabbits and animals, the second strictly prevents the road. The longer fence was also once built as a fence, but now against the dingo dogs that attacked livestock in packs. These 5,000 kilometers are also constantly patrolled and shot at the first encounter with dogs that have gone feral and are thinking of getting to the other side of the fence. Just think about it, to build a fence against dogs and then to walk along it every day to shoot the dogs. Isn't it funny? Today we will discuss it, and at the end, the most interesting thing: who is offended by the Australian fence? Photos and notes from local travelers who made it out. Enjoy the show. Of course, there are tons of videos on the internet in which staged tourists prove to us that the Australian fence is built from rabbits, and there is nothing wrong there. However, we should not forget the fact that there are 3 perimeters, the last of which hides a terrible secret. In fact, have you seen who offends there? Here are such insects live in Australia, seen with a cockroach, and tikike, amazing in every sense of the creatures, can easily be found in lakes and reservoirs on the territory of Australia. Or do you think that signs bathing is forbidden there for beauty? And this is just a spider. It's not a cut from a movie. It's just living things that hurt with us. Australian authorities reassure all the curious that the giant wall across the continent is built solely to protect the local fauna from wild rabbits, cats, and dingo dogs, whose huge population has allegedly become just a national problem for all Australians. However, the official version sounds extremely unconvincing. You see, such creatures do not exist anywhere, as if they are created there, protecting all territories with a fence from outsiders. Great Australian Wall in many places is under high voltage and reaches a height of 6 meters. Are cute-looking Australian rabbits so dangerous for ordinary people that such a colossal fence across the continent should be guarded 24 hours a day by unmarked paramilitary patrols? A little background: everyone knows that Australia was once a British colony. But if history had unfolded a little differently, now the locals would speak Dutch. There is a common misconception that Australia was discovered in 1770 by the famous British sailor James Cook. But this is not true. In fact, the first to reach the shores of the southern continent was Dutchman Willem Jansson in 1606. Only on April 19, 1770, James Cook and his crew on the ship Endeavour explored the eastern coast of the continent, renamed New Holland in New South Wales, and decided that it was a suitable place to establish a settlement. You see what the catch is: even with the official discovery of Materkia, Not everything is so simple, Skaladiadetia. In the 19th century, Australia was not yet such a comfortable country to live in as it is now. The population of the colony was less than 7,000, and people lacked food, shelter, and other necessities. And the Australian fence began to be built in the 19th century. Its total length is over 5,000 kilometers. The authorities continue to bullshit us into believing that this fence is necessary to protect us from wild animals. And here's a find along this fence. This footprint is not far from the Australian fence. It's estimated to date back several centuries. Geologists have marveled at this giant footprint, about 120 centimeters long. It may be one of the best evidence that there were giants on Earth in time immemorial. Or maybe they still exist, just beyond the third perimeter of the mysterious fence. But what's it all really for? Why 3 fences? One of the real theories is that behind the fence hides something that ordinary people are not supposed to see and know, and all witnesses are simply removed to prevent them from spreading the secret. So now just look carefully at the map and you will understand everything yourself. On most ancient maps, Australia was connected to Antarctica. And the interesting thing is, you can't just fly to Antarctica. Here's a Bertelli map from 1565. What we pay attention to: Antarctica without ice, with drawn relief, mountains, animals, forms a single continent with Australia. Why is it Australia and not a fantasy continent? Kangaroos, the unique indigenous inhabitants of this continent, are drawn on the map. Except that Australia was discovered in 1606, 41 years after the map was created. And in the southern part of Australia, there are snow-capped mountains. On ancient maps, Australia is called Terra Australis and is labeled as an area of land that is one with Antarctica. It is written that allegedly on Google Earth satellite images, bloggers recently found mysterious tunnels linking Antarctica and Australia. One conspiracy theory is that the lines on the satellite may be active transportation tunnels used by the world's behind-the-scenes government and the powerful of the world. On the ancient map of the world, in addition to the Australian continent, Terra Australis, are drawn images of outlandish and even fantastic creatures. Conspiracy theorists claim that it is they who dwell behind protected fences. They also write that on some closed Australian internet forums can be found incredible stories of travelers who still manage to visit those closed behind the fence of Australia territories. They tell about abandoned ghost towns, passages to Antarctica, that the sun there, behind the Great Australian Wall, can stand at one point for several hours and then sharply go behind the horizon or disappear altogether. The moon there can sharply approach and become several times larger or suddenly turn into a month. And the sky there is not blue in clear weather, but greenish blue and even sometimes bright turquoise. And at the end, the interesting thing that most alternative musicians don't tell you about. It's the Australian Yowies. In 1804, John Pinkerton published a book, Modern Geography, a description of empires, kingdoms, states, and colonies, with oceans, seas, and islands in all parts of the world. In it, there is a comment about the Aboriginal population who shared Sydney Harbour with another tribe. They were described as flat-nosed with wide nostrils, bushy eyebrows, and sunken eyes. Their mouths were of incredible width, with thick lips and protruding jaws. The natives considered them to be a completely different people, Yahoo or Yowie, meaning hairy people. The Kuku Yalanji tribe from tropical North Queensland, Australia, believe in the existence of this creature. They claim to have coexisted with the Yowie for centuries and have a long and detailed history of their attacks. It is described as mysterious and is said to resemble a huge ape-like man covered in hair, with claws instead of fingers. It is believed to be more primate-like in face and head compared to the North American Bigfoot and walks upright. These hominids were depicted in local rock art as tall, hairy figures alongside smaller Aboriginal figures. You see, these creatures are not just fantasy or legend. The locals even painted them on the walls as wild animals. There are a lot of photos here, that from expeditions, that from locals, the most, in my opinion, frightening. I will put in my Telegram, Dawn. Photos are enough. Look at them. You will not regret. The link I will leave in the description. Subscribe. European contact with the Yowies is said to have begun with the arrival of the First Fleet in Sydney Bay in 1788. In the early colonial era, Aborigines often warned British settlers to beware of the ape-like creatures lurking in the rugged mountains and dense forests. Continent. In general, Australia and its "inhabitants" as an object is actually very interesting. About it can be told in different ways. For some, it is just a country of mystical creatures. For others, it is a portal to the unknown. But one thing is certain, we do not know even 10% of the truth.